Well, good to see you again today, or at least for you to see me. And hey, look at this floor behind me. Fellowship Hall is getting redone. Thought this would be a good opportunity to let you see it. So, if you don't have to look at my face, you can look off to the side and you can see the nice new floor that we're getting put in. We're continuing Ruth today. We're up to chapter 2. We want to start in verse 1. And remember, we left Ruth and Naomi. They had just come back to Bethlehem. And Naomi is telling everybody to call her Mara, which means bitter, because of how rough her life has been. And she has had a hard time. We don't want to belittle that. She lost her husband and both of her sons. And for someone who hasn't gone through that, it would be hard to imagine what that would be like. And so we know that she's had a rough time, but she's blaming God for her troubles. And Ruth is still following her. But they've come back at the barley harvest time, which would be about this time of year, actually, late April, early May. And they don't have any food. They haven't planted, so they don't have anything to harvest. It's too late to really plant something now for the fall, too. So they're looking at a long year before they're able to get something planted to grow crops or, and to get any kind of livestock or anything like that. So it's going to be a tough time. Now, it starts in chapter 2 with explaining that there was a worthy man of the clan that Elimelech was part of. His name was Boaz. We might remember Boaz. Boaz is an important fellow. He is a good man, as far as we're told here, a worthy man. He is also, interestingly enough, and I think this will have an impact on the situation in our chapter today, even though the chapter itself doesn't tell us about this, he is the son of a foreign-born woman, Rahab. We remember Rahab from the book of Joshua. She was saved when Jericho was destroyed. She had been a prostitute, but she becomes a wife and mother. She marries a man named Salmon, and they have a child named Boaz. And apparently she was a good mother, and Salmon was a good father. They raised Boaz right, and he's now a worthy man. This may help us really with the setting of the time. We've talked about, we don't know exactly when the setting of the timing of the story of Ruth is, but we can kind of look at Salmon and Rahab when they come into the land, and then Boaz is his son. We don't know what age Boaz is now, though, but even if he's an elderly man, and even if Salmon and Ruth married Rahab when he was an elderly man, and she gave birth to Boaz, it's not too far into the distant future at this point. So it tells us about him, and we'll find out why in a minute. It just kind of introduces him. Ruth says to Naomi, I need to go find some food, basically. Let me go glean. And now, one of the laws in the law of Moses for all of the farmers was when you plant your fields and when you reap your harvest of your fields, you leave what's around the corners of the fields. You don't get that. And if the reapers, as they're gathering this stuff together, if they drop some, you leave it. You don't go back and scrape every bit of it. And this was an important thing. God said that that was supposed to be left behind so that the poor or travelers that were traveling through could stop by and get something out of the field. They could get the remnants of that field after it had been harvested, and they could eat that. So this is what Ruth is offering to do. Let me go out and pick up the scraps that are left behind when they reap the fields. So Naomi says that's a good idea. Go and do that. So she went out. She's looking for somebody, hopefully someone who is following the law, because obviously, like everything else, not everyone did. They might have gone all the way to the edge of the field. They might have cleaned everything up. There might not have been anything left. So she's hoping she finds somebody whose field has some grain left in it. And so she looks and she finds, and she starts to glean in a field that has some reapers in it. She's following along behind them. Whatever they drop, she'll pick it up and that kind of thing. Well, the field that she winds up in belongs to this Boaz that we mentioned at the beginning. And so now we know why he's important. It was his field that she finds. And when Boaz came from Bethlehem out into the field, he saw the reapers and he said, "The Lord be with you." And they said, "The Lord bless you." Kind of common greetings, shalom, kind of thing that the Jewish people today still would say. But basically, greeting one another. And Boaz says to the young men, the man who's in charge of all the other reapers, he sees, he knows this is the kind of employer that Boaz is. He knows his employees, and he looks out there in the field and he sees, hey, wait, who's that over there? I didn't. Who is that? And so he points, of course, to Ruth. Who's she belong to? Whose woman is she? Whose servant is she? Where'd she come from? And so the servant who's in charge said, well, she's the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And so Boaz then goes and greets her once he finds out who she is. So again, this is not the kind of thing that just everybody would do. Remember, she's a foreigner in a foreign land. A lot of people would turn their nose up. A lot of people would walk the other way. A lot of people would ignore her. Some people would kick her out of their field. Some people would run her out, beat her out. So she's fortunate that she's come into the field of someone who is a good, godly person. And so he goes to greet her, and uh, she says, the servant had told him, she had said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers. And so she came and she continued from early in the morning until now, and it's apparently on into the middle of the day. And he said, except for one short rest that she had. And so Boaz greets Ruth. He says to her, now listen, my daughter. Now, obviously, she's not really his daughter. This is a phrase, but also might indicate that he's a good bit older than her and not of the same age that she is. But he says, listen, my daughter, do not go glean in another field or leave this one. Keep close to my young women. So he has some young women that are doing the work there too. And he said, you stay close to them. Don't go away. And then he explains why. And remember the time of the judges, and remember the stories we've talked about and how the judges ended, and some of the other things that have been going on during this time period. Notice what he says. Don't stay close. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. Haven't I charged my young men not to touch you? So he has ordered his men to leave her alone, to not harm her. Now, when he says not to touch her, this could obviously be a situation of like beating her and running her out of the field kind of thing, or it could be even something more serious like a rape type situation, which we've already covered was something that did happen in that time in some places. And of course, it still happens today. But he's warned the men, you leave her alone. Let her glean. Let her do her picking up of the grain like she's supposed to be able to. And then he goes on to say, and when you are thirsty, you go to the vessels and get a drink that from what the young men have drawn. So he said, you drink the water, you don't get yourself overheated, these kinds of things. Take care of yourself, and you work, and you get your grain here. And then she falls on her face and bows her face down to the ground right in front of him, and she says to him, why have I, a foreigner, found this favor in your eyes? Why are you taking notice of me? Why would you do that? Foreigners generally, in most countries, even today, foreigners are sometimes looked down on. They're sometimes mistreated. Some places worse than others. And in that time, certainly it was the case too. And remember who she is and what she is, a Moabite, and the history that the Israelites have with her. It's not a pleasant one. And so some people would have mistreated her. So she's, why are you being so kind to me? Why are you doing this? Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me. How you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before." It can be kind of a frightening thing to be in a foreign land, even just for a visit. You don't know anybody, especially if the language is different. That could be a definite problem. But you're in a strange land, strange customs, strange things you don't understand. And yet she was willing to leave her father and mother, come to this new land. And what she's done to care for Naomi and what she's doing now to care for Naomi. And he says, I've heard about that. Apparently, it's kind of news travels fast, the same way it does today. The gossip gets spread pretty quickly. But in this case, it was good gossip, if there is such a thing. Good news. The good that she had done was known. The Bible talks about the fact that some men's deeds are known beforehand. In other words, they're obvious. They can't be hidden. Other men's deeds, they follow after them. But Ruth's deeds were those kinds of deeds that were just clearly seen. Everybody knew what kind of woman she was and what she was doing for her mother-in-law. And then he goes on to say in verse 12, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." We see what kind of man Barnabas is. Boaz is. Boaz, far from blaming God for bad things that have happened in Ruth's life, he says he's sheltering you through the difficult times. The poem and we'll stop here in verse 12 for today. Continue that chapter next time. Part of the poem, The Footprints in the Sand. And if you remember that poem, and it talks about the footprints, and then there were times, the hardest times of this person's life, and there was only one said, and why did you leave me during that time, Lord? And the Lord saying, no. It was during that time I was carrying you. And that's the image that Boaz paints. The Lord is sheltering you under his wing. You think you're having a rough time, but in actuality, you're seeking refuge from God, and he's put his wing over you to protect you. We're going through a time right now where there are a lot of hardships going on. There are people out of work. There are other people who can't leave home and want to. There are other people who are working and in danger of getting sick and catching the COVID virus. A lot of things are going on. There's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of political turmoil. There's a lot of things are happening right now. And some people might turn to try to blame God for that. But instead, we need to be seeking refuge under his wing, knowing that he is there to be with us through not just the easy times, but through the difficult times as well, and to shelter us and to protect us. And can we even begin to imagine how much harder our lives would be if God had not been sheltering us through all the things that he sheltered us through, protecting us from all the things he's protected us from? We don't even know what all things might have happened in our life or how much worse our life might have even been. We need to always be thankful to him. Yes, we have hard times. Yes, there are difficulties. Ruth and Naomi had experienced a lot of those difficulties. But Boaz puts it in perspective. Come to the Lord for refuge. Don't blame him. Seek him. Hope that this will be encouraging to you, and I hope that we can see that perhaps Boaz's own history with his mother being a foreigner impacted him to take mercy on this foreigner of Ruth. And of course, the fact that he is of the same clan as her dead father-in-law may have something to do with that too. But again, her goodness, the fact that she had treated Naomi with kindness, is now being repaid to her. she's receiving some kindness. And we're going to see that kindness even more so from Boaz in the latter part of this chapter. And so I hope you'll continue to keep an eye out for that tomorrow. Thank you for being with us, and I hope that this is a blessing to you and that you've been encouraged by it.